The telegram announcing her father's death arrived on the same morning Penelope Kendrick discovered she had 37 cents to her name and nowhere left to go except west. She stood in the cramped Boston boarding house room that had been her home for 3 months since the textile mill closed, holding the thin paper that confirmed what she had feared since his letters stopped coming. Her father, a mining engineer in Nevada Territory, had succumbed to pneumonia in a place called Virginia City. The telegram was brief, impersonal, and final. What it did not mention was that he had left her a small inheritance, enough to pay for passage west and little else, held in trust by a lawyer whose name she could barely pronounce. The journey took 2 weeks by train, each mile carrying her further from everything familiar into a landscape that seemed determined to prove her insignificance. The green hills of home gave way to endless plains, then to deserts so vast and empty it made her chest ache. By the time she reached Nevada Territory in July of 1876, Penelope had worn through her second-best boots and developed a persistent cough from the dust that infiltrated every train car. Virginia City sprawled across the mountainside like a child's block scattered in anger, all sharp angles and hasty construction. The lawyer, a thin man named Morrison who smelled of tobacco and old paper, met her at the stage depot with news that felt like another death. Her father's debts had consumed most of what he left behind. What remained was a single room above a saloon, prepaid for 3 months and $42. "Your father was a good man, Miss Kendrick," Morrison said, adjusting spectacles that kept sliding down his narrow nose. "But mining is an expensive profession when you are not the one extracting the ore. He invested poorly." Penelope nodded because speaking seemed impossible around the tightness in her throat. 23 years old, alone in a territory that felt as foreign as the moon, with barely enough money to survive until autumn. She had attended Miss Porter's School for Young Ladies in Connecticut, spoke passable French, could recite Byron from memory, and possessed absolutely no skills that seemed remotely useful in a mining town perched on the side of a mountain. The room Morrison showed her was smaller than her boarding house accommodation in Boston, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked C Street where miners trudged past at all hours, their faces gray with dust and exhaustion. The saloon below started its piano music at noon and continued until well past midnight. The sound drifted up through the floorboards, tinny and relentless. She spent her first night sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing her traveling dress, watching the sun set over mountains that looked like they had been cut from iron. Somewhere in this town, her father had lived and worked and eventually died. She had not seen him in 5 years, not since her mother's death when he decided Boston held too many painful memories. His letters had been regular at first, full of optimism about silver strikes and future prosperity, then increasingly sporadic, then nothing at all. The next morning, desperate and practical, Penelope descended the narrow stairs to inquire about work. The saloon owner, a surprisingly refined woman named Margaret who had come west during the California gold rush, looked her over with shrewd eyes that had seen every variety of desperation. "Can you pour whiskey without spilling it?" Margaret asked. "Yes, but I would prefer not to." "Can you sing?" "Not well." "Can you read and write?" "Fluently," Penelope said. "I attended finishing school." Margaret's expression shifted from shrewd to calculating. "Half the men in this town cannot sign their own names. They make their marks on contracts they cannot read and send money home to families they cannot write to. There is a Mexican woman down in Chinatown who does scribing work, but she charges $2 a letter and most of the miners think that is robbery. I could do it for less. You could do it for $1 and still make more than you would pouring drinks and keep your dignity besides. Margaret crossed her arms. I will let you use the corner table by the window during afternoon hours. You give me 20% of what you make for the space and the advertising I will provide. Penelope agreed before she could think better of it. Margaret produced a piece of paper and pen that afternoon, and Penelope lettered a sign in her careful schoolgirl script. Letters written, personal and business correspondence, 50 cents. Reading services also available. The first customer arrived within an hour, an Irish miner named Patrick who wanted to write to his mother in County Cork. He sat across from her, massive hands folded on the table, and dictated in a thick brogue that took all her concentration to parse. Tell her the work is hard but honest. Tell her I am saving money and will send for her and the little ones when I have enough. Tell her I think of her soda bread and her singing. Tell her America is everything I hoped and nothing I expected. Penelope wrote it all down, her pen moving swiftly across the paper, translating his rough spoken words into proper written English that still retained his meaning and warmth. When she read it back to him, his eyes grew wet. That is my heart on paper, miss. That is exactly what I wanted to say but did not have the words for. He paid her 50 cents and left, and Penelope felt something shift inside her chest. This was work that mattered. This was connecting people across impossible distances, preserving love and longing in ink and paper. More men came as the days passed. Miners mostly, with hands scarred from drilling and dynamite, who sat across from her and opened their hearts in halting sentences. They dictated letters to wives and sweethearts, to mothers and children, to brothers who had not made the journey west. They told of silver strikes and cave-ins, of wages earned and money saved. They confessed loneliness and homesickness in voices that cracked with emotion they would never show their fellow miners. Penelope wrote it all. She learned to hear the love beneath the awkward phrasings, to translate rough sentiment into words that would touch the hearts of distant readers. She kept her rates low and her judgment absent. She never laughed at poorly expressed feelings or clumsy declarations. The miners appreciated this. They began to recommend her services to others, and soon she was spending 6 hours a day at her corner table, her right hand cramping from constant writing. She was transcribing a letter about a silver vein that might finally pay out when he first walked in. The saloon went briefly quiet, which was unusual for 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Penelope glanced up from her paper to see a tall man in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright Nevada sunlight. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting, and surveyed the room with the calm wariness of someone accustomed to assessing situations quickly. He was not dressed like the miners. His clothes marked him as someone who worked outdoors but not underground. Canvas trousers, a blue shirt faded from many washings, a leather vest, and boots that showed hard use but regular care. A cowboy, she thought, though that seemed unusual for a mining town. When he moved toward the bar, she noticed he wore a gun low on his hip with the ease of long familiarity. Margaret served him whiskey and they spoke briefly, Margaret's hand gesturing toward Penelope's corner. The man looked over, and even across the room she could see his eyes were startlingly light, gray or perhaps blue. He nodded, drained his whiskey, and walked toward her table. Up close, he was younger than she initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with a face weathered by sun and wind. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against his tanned skin. He held his hat in both hands, and when he spoke his voice was deep and surprisingly soft. "Miss Kendrick, Margaret says you write letters." "I do. 50 cents for personal correspondence, $1 for business matters. Personal, he said. He remained standing, looking uncomfortable in a way that seemed unusual for someone who carried himself with such easy confidence outdoors. Though I am not certain that is quite the right word. Please sit. Penelope gestured to the chair across from her, the same chair where dozens of miners had sat before him. What is your name? Nathan Ashford. I work for the Ponderosa Ranch about 15 miles north of here. I bring cattle into town for the mining companies, and freight sometimes when they need an extra driver. She prepared her pen and paper. And who would you like to write to, Mr. Ashford? He sat, setting his hat on the table beside him, and was silent for a long moment. Outside, a freight wagon rumbled past. The piano player downstairs started a melancholy tune that spoke of lost loves and distant homes. I need to write to a woman in Colorado, he said finally. Her name is Sarah Mitchell. She lives in Denver with her aunt and uncle. Is she family? No, Miss Kendrick. I intend to ask her to marry me. Penelope's pen paused above the paper. She had written many love letters over the past weeks, declarations and devotions from men to women they had left behind or hoped to build futures with. But something in Nathan Ashford's voice carried a weight that made this different. That is a significant letter, she said carefully. Are you certain you want someone else to write it? I cannot write myself. I can read some, enough to get by, but I never had much schooling. I can sign my name and not much else. He met her eyes directly, no shame in his admission. I have been thinking about what to say for 3 weeks now. I know the words I want, I just cannot put them on paper in a way that would do them justice. Tell me about her, Penelope said, a new sheet of paper ready. Tell me why you want to marry her. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his hands now resting on his knees, and began to speak. I met Sarah 2 years ago when I was driving cattle through Colorado. Her uncle owns a mercantile in Denver. She was working behind the counter, and when I came in to buy supplies, she recommended a brand of coffee that she said was better than what I was reaching for. She was right. We talked while she tallied my purchases. She asked where I was headed and why, and she listened like my answers truly mattered to her. Penelope wrote in her own shorthand, capturing the essence to translate later into proper letter format. I came back through Denver 4 times that year, Nathan continued. Each time I made excuses to stop at that mercantile. We would talk, sometimes for a few minutes, once for nearly an hour when the store was quiet. She told me about growing up in Missouri, about coming west after her parents died. I told her about working ranches since I was 14, about wanting to have my own spread someday. The last time I saw her was 6 months ago. I told her I was thinking of settling in Nevada territory, and I asked if I could write to her. She said yes. But you cannot write, Penelope said gently. No, so I did not write, and now 6 months have passed and she must think I forgot about her or that I am a liar or worse. Why did you wait so long to seek help? Nathan's jaw tightened. Pride, I suppose, stupidity. The idea of telling another person what I wanted to say to her, of having those private feelings go through someone else's hand before they reach hers. But staying silent is worse. At least this way she will know I was thinking of her. Penelope set down her pen and looked at him directly. Mr. Ashford, if I write this letter, I will write exactly what you tell me to write. Your words, your feelings, just rendered in ink. I am only the hand that holds the pen. What you say is yours, and I will keep it in confidence. Something eased in his expression. Thank you, Miss Kendrick. They worked for over an hour. Nathan spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing confidence as Penelope asked questions that drew out his feelings. He described what he loved about Sarah, her quick mind and quicker laugh, the way she saw possibilities in things rather than limitations. He explained his work, his prospects, his hope to lease land and start his own ranch within 2 years. He apologized for his silence and asked if she would consider waiting for him, if she would consider a future together in Nevada territory. Penelope translated it all into eloquent prose that still sounded like him, removing the repetitions and false starts but keeping the essential Nathan in every line. When she read it back to him, he was silent for a long moment. "That is what I wanted to say," he said finally. "Exactly that." "How did you know?" I listened. She blotted the ink carefully. "I will copy this in fair hand for you now. It will take about 20 minutes. She wrote the final version while he waited, her best penmanship forming each letter with care. This was more than just another correspondence. This was a man's future, his hope for love and partnership committed to paper. When she finished, she folded it carefully and sealed it with wax. Nathan paid her 50 cents, then added another quarter, for taking such care with it. "That is not necessary." "It is to me." He stood, collecting his hat. "Thank you, Miss Kendrick, truly." He left, and Penelope sat alone at her table, feeling strangely moved. She had written love letters for other men, but something about Nathan Ashford's quiet sincerity had touched her. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in asking for help with something so personal. Perhaps it was the way he spoke about Sarah Mitchell, with such clear affection and respect. She thought about it that evening as she lay in her narrow bed, the saloon piano thumping below. She wondered if Sarah Mitchell knew how fortunate she was, to have someone care for her enough to overcome pride and seek help in declaring it. Nathan returned 2 weeks later. Penelope was writing a letter for a Welsh miner named Reese when she looked up and saw him standing just inside the saloon entrance, hat in hand, waiting for her to finish. Her heart did an odd little jump that she told herself was simply recognition of a returning customer. She completed Reese's letter, accepted his payment, and watched him leave before turning her attention to Nathan. He approached her table with the same quiet confidence, though she noticed he seemed less uncomfortable than during his first visit. "Mr. Ashford, do you need to write another letter?" "I do." He sat across from her, and she noticed his hands were scraped raw across the knuckles, working hands constantly used. "I received a reply from Sarah. I need to respond." Something sharp twisted in Penelope's chest, though she could not name what it was. She wrote back, "That is wonderful." What did she say? Nathan reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded letter. "I was hoping you could tell me. I can make out some of it, but her handwriting is fancier than what I am used to, and I do not want to misunderstand anything important." He passed the letter across the table. Penelope unfolded it carefully, seeing immediately that Sarah Mitchell had indeed written in an elaborate script full of flourishes. The letter was 2 pages long, written on good quality paper that suggested comfort if not wealth. "Would you like me to read it aloud?" Penelope asked. "Please." "But quietly, if you do not mind." She began to read, keeping her voice low beneath the ambient noise of the saloon. Sarah's letter was warm and enthusiastic. She expressed relief at hearing from Nathan, admitted she had worried about his silence, and said she had thought of him often over the past months. She wrote about her life in Denver, about her work at her uncle's store, about the city growing so quickly it seemed to change every week. She asked questions about his life, his work, Nevada territory. The final paragraph made Penelope's voice catch slightly. "You asked if I would consider a future with you in Nevada. Nathan, I have thought of little else since reading your letter. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I would like to discover it with you. Please write again soon. Tell me everything about your life there, about what you hope for, about your dreams. I want to know all of it." Penelope folded the letter and passed it back across the table. Nathan took it carefully, his expression unreadable. "She said yes," he said finally. Not exactly yes to marriage, not yet, but yes to considering a future together. It is a promising response, Mr. Ashford. Nathan, he said, if you are going to be writing my courtship letters, you should call me Nathan. Then you should call me Penelope. He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face entirely. That is a beautiful name, literary. My mother loved mythology. She wanted to name me after someone clever and faithful. Your mother chose well. He set Sarah's letter carefully on the table beside his hat. I need to write back to her. I want to tell her about the land I am hoping to lease, about the ranch I want to build. I want to ask her more about herself, about what she wants from life. Is that too much for one letter? Not at all. Let's begin. They fell into an easy rhythm, Nathan speaking while Penelope's pen moved across the paper. He described the ranch land he had found. High valley with good grass and a reliable stream, backed by mountains that would shelter cattle from winter storms. He talked about his plans to start with a small herd and build gradually, to do things carefully and right. He asked Sarah about her interests, her favorite books, what made her laugh. As Penelope wrote, she found herself watching him when he paused to gather his thoughts. The way he rubbed his thumb against his first two fingers when he was thinking. The small scar through his eyebrow that gave him a slightly rakish look. The breadth of his shoulders under the faded blue shirt. She told herself she was simply observing details, the way she did with all her customers to better capture their personalities in writing. When the letter was complete and copied in fair hand, Nathan paid her again with the extra quarter added. Same time in 2 weeks, he asked. I am here most afternoons. After he left, Penelope sat at her empty table and tried to examine the odd hollowness in her chest. She was helping Nathan court another woman, which was exactly what he had hired her to do. Sarah Mitchell sounded kind and intelligent from her letter, exactly the sort of woman a good man like Nathan should marry. Penelope was simply doing her job. But that night, lying in her narrow bed, she thought about Nathan's descriptions of the ranch he wanted to build, and she imagined what it would be like to help create something like that. To have a partner who spoke about the future with such careful optimism. To be the recipient of such steadfast affection. The letters continued through August and into September. Every 2 weeks, Nathan would appear at her table with Sarah's latest letter and his response ready to dictate. Penelope watched their courtship unfold through written words, feeling like a translator of hearts. Sarah wrote about books she loved, and Nathan asked Penelope to recommend which ones he should try reading, to have something to discuss with Sarah beyond ranching and cattle. Penelope suggested Ivanhoe, which she read to him in sections during the times between letters when he would sometimes stop by just to talk. He would sit at her table during quiet afternoon hours, nursing a single whiskey, and they would discuss Scott's novel. I do not understand why Rowena chooses the night over Rebecca, Nathan said one afternoon in late September. Rebecca is clearly the better woman. Rowena is who society expects him to choose, Penelope replied. Sometimes people follow expectations rather than their hearts. That seems like a waste of the only life we get. He looked at her over the rim of his glass. Do you believe that we should follow expectations? I believe we should follow what makes sense, what is practical and sustainable. That is not what I asked. Penelope set down her pen. Outside the window, miners were changing shifts, trudging up the mountain or down toward town. I came west because I had no other choice. Every decision I have made since arriving has been about survival. I do not have the luxury of following my heart. Everyone has that luxury. It is just that some people's hearts lead them to practical places and others lead them to trouble. And where does your heart lead you, Nathan? To a ranch in a high valley, I hope. To a life with Sarah if she will have me. He finished his whiskey. To afternoons talking about books with a friend who makes me think about things differently. Friend. The word sat strangely with Penelope, both more and less than what she wanted. She had never had a male friend before. Miss Porter's school had been careful to keep young ladies separate from young men. In Boston, her interactions with men had been brief and formal. But Nathan had become something like a friend over these months, despite the unusual nature of their arrangement. In October, Nathan's letters to Sarah became more frequent. He had secured the lease on his land and was beginning to build a small cabin before winter set in. He wanted Sarah to know about every development, every step toward their future together. Penelope wrote his excitement into eloquent paragraphs, and she tried to ignore the growing ache in her own chest. "I am thinking of asking her to come in the spring," Nathan said one afternoon. "To visit, to see the land and the town, to decide if she could build a life here. That is a significant step. We have been writing for 4 months now. I know her mind and her heart, even if we have only spent a handful of hours in the same room. I am ready, Penelope. I want to marry her." Penelope's hand trembled slightly as she wrote. She forced it steady through sheer will. "Then you should tell her that." The proposal letter took 2 hours to compose. Nathan wanted every word to be perfect, every sentiment exactly right. He spoke of his love for Sarah in words that Penelope translated into prose so beautiful it made her own eyes sting. When she read it back to him, his face was bright with hope. "You think she will say yes?" he asked. "I think she would be foolish not to," Penelope replied, and meant it despite the sharp pain beneath her ribs. The response came 3 weeks later. Nathan arrived at the saloon during an unusual morning hour, interrupting Penelope as she wrote a business letter for one of the mine foremen. She looked up, saw his face, and knew immediately what Sarah's answer had been. "She said yes," Nathan said simply. He was smiling so widely it looked like his face might split. "She said yes to visiting, and she said if the territory and the land are as I describe them, she would be honored to marry me." "Nathan, that is wonderful." Penelope stood, and he caught her hands in his, squeezing them with excitement that made him momentarily forget propriety. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for helping me find the words. I could not have done this without you." His hands were warm and calloused, strong from work. Penelope could feel every place where his skin touched hers. She gently extracted her hands and sat back down, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with happiness. "When will she arrive?" Her voice sounded normal, which seemed impossible. "April. After the mountain passes clear. I will need to finish the cabin, get everything ready." He sat across from her, his energy barely contained. "I want to write and tell her about everything I am planning. Will you help me with one more letter?" "Of course." Penelope wrote Nathan's joy into words, describing the home he would build for Sarah, the life they would create together. She kept her hands steady and her voice neutral, and when he left, she sat at her empty table for a long time, staring at nothing. She had fallen in love with a man who loved someone else. The realization came with devastating clarity. Somewhere between that first letter and now, between afternoons discussing books and learning his dreams, she had let her heart betray her common sense. Nathan Ashford was kind and intelligent and honorable, and he was completely devoted to a woman 1,000 miles away. Penelope had become the instrument of her own heartbreak, writing love letters that bound Nathan more tightly to Sarah with every word. She had listened to him speak about the woman he loved, had translated his feelings into beautiful prose, had encouraged his courtship and celebrated his success. And all the while, without meaning to or wanting to, she had fallen for him herself. She should stop, she thought. She should tell Nathan she could no longer write his letters, make some excuse about being too busy with other clients. But she knew she would not. She would continue helping him because that was what he needed, and she had discovered that Nathan's happiness mattered more to her than her own. The realization did not make her noble, it just made her sad. November brought the first snow, heavy wet flakes that turned Virginia City's streets into freezing mud. Fewer miners came for letter writing as the cold deepened, and everyone focused on survival rather than sentiment. Penelope's income dropped accordingly. Margaret let her sleep late and skip some of her rent to help her through the lean time. Nathan still came every 2 weeks, sometimes struggling through snow to reach town from his ranch site. He would arrive stamping his boots clear of ice, his face reddened by cold, and sit at her table drinking coffee instead of whiskey while dictating letters about cabin building and planning. Sarah wrote back enthusiastically, full of questions and anticipation. "She wants to know if there is a church in Virginia City," Nathan said one gray December afternoon. "She wants to be married properly." "There are several churches," Penelope replied. "The Methodist church on B Street is particularly nice." "Have you attended?" "A few times." She had gone seeking comfort and found only the same hollow loneliness that filled her boarding house room. Nathan studied her face. "You seem tired, Penelope. Are you well?" "Just the winter, I think. It is harder here than in Boston." "How is your business?" "Slower in the cold months." People think less about distant family when they are focused on staying warm. He frowned. "Are you able to support yourself?" "I manage." Pride kept her from admitting how close her finances ran to the edge each month. "I could help, loan you something until spring when business picks up." "No." The word came out more sharply than she intended. "Thank you, but no, I am managing fine." It was not quite a lie. She was managing barely by spending as little as possible and accepting Margaret's kindness. She would survive until spring when the miners returned to thinking about home and hearts along with silver. Nathan looked like he wanted to argue but let it drop. Instead, he said, "Will you come to the wedding? When Sarah arrives and we marry, I would like you to be there." Penelope's chest constricted. "That is kind, but I barely know you both. You know me better than most people in this territory, and you helped build what Sarah and I have. It would mean something to have you there." She wanted to refuse. The thought of watching Nathan marry Sarah was almost unbearable, but he was looking at her with such genuine hope that she found herself nodding. "If you still want me there in April, I will come. I will want you there." After he left, Penelope sat at her table and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her spine, and went back to work. December became January, and January crept into February. Penelope survived the winter through careful economy and Margaret's continued generosity. She read more than she wrote during those slow months, borrowing books from the few lending libraries in town, and losing herself in other people's stories to avoid dwelling on her own situation. Nathan's visits continued, regular as clockwork despite snow and cold. His letters to Sarah grew longer and more detailed as his cabin neared completion. He described furniture he was building, a kitchen with a good stove, windows that would let in morning light. He was building a home for the woman he loved, and Penelope wrote every detail with aching precision. In March, as the snow began to melt and Virginia City emerged muddy and exhausted from winter, Nathan arrived with unexpected news. "Sarah is coming in 3 weeks," he said without preamble. "Earlier than planned. Her uncle is sending a freight shipment west and she is traveling with the wagon train for safety. I need to finish everything immediately." "That is wonderful," Penelope said automatically. "Is it? The cabin is not quite done. I wanted more time to make everything perfect." "She is not coming for a perfect cabin, Nathan. She is coming for you." He smiled at that, some of his tension easing. "You are right. I just want everything to be ready for her, to show her I am a man who can provide properly. From everything you have told me, Sarah Mitchell is practical and intelligent. She will see your effort and dedication, which matters more than whether the window frames are perfectly square." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the saloon quieter than usual in the early afternoon. Outside, the sounds of the town resuming full activity after winter, hammers and saws and the constant rumble of ore wagons. "I am going to miss this," Nathan said suddenly. "Miss what?" "These afternoons. Talking with you. I know we met because I needed your services, but somewhere along the way you became my friend. My best friend, really. The only person in this territory I can talk to about things that matter." Penelope's throat tightened. "You will have Sarah soon. A wife is meant to be a friend as well as a partner. I know, and I am grateful for that future, but I will still miss these conversations." He looked at her directly. "You have been more help to me than you know, Penelope, not just with the letters, but with everything. Talking about books and ideas and life. You made this winter less lonely." "You did the same for me," she admitted quietly. Something shifted in his expression, a question forming that Penelope desperately did not want him to ask. She stood quickly, gathering papers. "I should prepare for the afternoon customers, and you should return to your cabin if you want everything ready in 3 weeks." Nathan rose slowly. "Yes, you are right." He set his payment on the table, the usual 50 cents plus a silver dollar. "For friendship," he said when she began to protest. "For all the extra time and conversation you have given me beyond what I paid for." After he left, Penelope held the silver dollar and tried to be grateful for what she had, for the friendship Nathan offered so sincerely. It should have been enough. In a fair world it would have been enough, but the heart, she had learned, did not operate on principles of fairness or gratitude. It wanted what it wanted, regardless of sense or possibility. The weeks until Sarah's arrival passed in a blur of activity. The town came fully alive after winter's hibernation, and Penelope's letter-writing business picked up dramatically. She worked long hours, her hand cramping from constant writing, grateful for the distraction and the income. Nathan did not visit again before Sarah's arrival. He sent a message through one of the freight drivers saying he was focused on finishing the cabin and preparing. Penelope told herself she was relieved not to see him, that it made things easier. On the afternoon Sarah Mitchell was scheduled to arrive, Penelope positioned herself at her usual table and tried to focus on work. The freight wagons came in around 3 o'clock, pulling up to the main depot on C Street. She heard the commotion, the shouts of teamsters and the creak of heavy wheels, and she kept her eyes firmly on the letter she was transcribing. She did not go watch Nathan reunite with his intended. She had no right to witness that private moment, and she had no desire to torture herself further. That evening, Margaret sat down at Penelope's table during a rare quiet moment. "Your cowboy came in earlier with his lady from Colorado," Margaret said without preamble. "Pretty girl, young, maybe 19 or 20, seems excited about everything." "That is good," Penelope said flatly. "He was looking around for you. I told him you had stepped out. Thank you." Margaret studied her with those shrewd eyes that had probably seen every variety of human foolishness over the years. "How long have you been in love with him?" Penelope's head jerked up. "I am not in love with anyone." "Child, I have been watching people lie to themselves and each other for 30 years. You light up every time he walks in and you go dim when he leaves. You are in love with Nathan Ashford, and from what I can see, it is breaking your heart." Tears threatened, hot and unexpected. Penelope blinked them back fiercely. "It does not matter what I feel. He is in love with someone else, and I have no right to interfere with that. Love does not care about rights or propriety, but I suppose you know that already." Margaret stood, patting Penelope's shoulder with unexpected gentleness. "I am sorry, dear. For what it is worth, I think that Cowboy is a fool for not seeing what is right in front of him. He sees exactly what he wants to see. That is not foolishness, it is focus." The next afternoon, Nathan came to the saloon with Sarah at his side. Penelope looked up from writing a letter for a Cornish miner and felt her heart crack cleanly in two. Sarah Mitchell was lovely. Small and delicate, with blonde hair gathered in a neat bun and blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. She wore a traveling dress that managed to look fresh despite days on a freight wagon, and she held Nathan's arm with comfortable affection. They approached Penelope's table together. Nathan was smiling, genuinely happy, and Penelope forced herself to smile back. "Penelope, I want you to meet Sarah. Sarah, this is Penelope Kendrick, the woman I've told you about." Sarah extended her hand, which Penelope took and shook gently. "Miss Kendrick, I am so pleased to finally meet you. Nathan has spoken so highly of you. Thank you for all you have done for us." "I just wrote letters," Penelope said. "The words were Nathan's. But you made them beautiful," Sarah insisted. "I've kept every letter and they are treasures. Your skill gave us the ability to truly know each other across all that distance." She was kind, Penelope realized with dismay. Sarah Mitchell was genuinely kind and warm, and exactly the sort of woman Nathan deserved. Hating her would have been easier, but it was impossible to hate someone so fundamentally good. "I am glad I could help," Penelope said. "When is the wedding?" "2 weeks," Nathan replied. "At the Methodist church, just as you suggested. We want to marry before summer work gets too demanding." He paused. "You will still come, will not you? It would mean a great deal to both of us." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Please do come, Miss Kendrick. I know so few people here, and you have been such an important part of our story." Penelope found herself agreeing, because refusing would have raised questions she could not answer. They spoke for a few more minutes about wedding plans and the cabin and Sarah's first impressions of Nevada territory, and then Nathan and Sarah left, arms linked, heads bent together in intimate conversation. Margaret appeared at Penelope's side as they exited. "Still think you are not heartbroken?" "I think I am very good at surviving things I would rather not endure," Penelope replied, and returned to her letters. The 2 weeks before the wedding were strange and difficult. Penelope threw herself into work, writing letters for miners from dawn until well past dark, earning as much as she could to try to distract herself from what was coming. She saw Nathan twice more, once when he stopped by to deliver a wedding invitation written in Sarah's neat hand, and once in passing on the street when he was showing Sarah around town. The night before the wedding, Penelope sat in her small room and seriously considered not attending. She could plead illness. Margaret would support the fiction. It would be easier not to watch Nathan pledge his life to someone else, not to see the joy on his face when he married the woman he loved. But she had promised she would be there, and Penelope kept her promises even when they cost her. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, one of those perfect spring mornings that made Nevada territory seem almost habitable. Penelope dressed in her best dress, a dark blue silk that had been her mother's and was slightly out of fashion but well maintained. She pinned her dark hair carefully and looked at herself in the small mirror above her washstand. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You can be happy for a friend." The Methodist church was small but pretty, wooden with a white steeple that could be seen from most of Virginia City. Inside, perhaps 30 people had gathered, other ranchers and their wives, some of the merchants Nathan did business with, a few of the miners who had met him in town. Margaret was there, giving Penelope a supportive nod when she slipped into a pew near the back. Sarah was radiant in a simple white dress, her blonde hair crowned with wild flowers that must have been hard to find in this harsh landscape. Nathan stood at the front of the church in a new suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, his hair trimmed, his face bright with happiness. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. The minister spoke about love and partnership, about two people choosing to face life's challenges together. Nathan and Sarah exchanged vows in clear, steady voices, promising faithfulness and devotion. When Nathan kissed his new wife, the small gathering applauded. Penelope clapped with everyone else, her hands moving mechanically while something inside her quietly shattered. This was the right ending to Nathan's story. He had found love and built a future, had overcome his inability to write through determination and help. He would be happy with Sarah in their Mountain Valley ranch. This was good and right and exactly as it should be, but that did not make it hurt any less. The reception was held in the church's small assembly room, with food contributed by various well-wishers and a fiddler providing music. Penelope stayed for exactly as long as propriety demanded, congratulated the couple once more, and then slipped away while others were distracted by dancing. She walked back to her room through the afternoon sunshine, climbed the stairs to her small space above the saloon, and finally allowed herself to cry in earnest. She cried for what she had lost without ever really having it, for the friendship that would change now that Nathan was married, for the future she had imagined despite knowing better. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she lay on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Eventually, the sun set, and the saloon below started its evening routine. Penelope washed her face, changed into her everyday dress, and went downstairs to work. Life continued regardless of personal heartbreak. Letters still needed writing, and she still needed to eat. Margaret took one look at her and said nothing, which Penelope appreciated more than sympathy would have warranted. Penelope expected not to see Nathan again, or at least not often. He was married now, settled on his ranch, focused on building his life with Sarah. Their friendship, such as it had been, would naturally fade. She braced herself for that loss while trying to convince herself it was for the best. But 3 days after the wedding, Nathan appeared at her table during the usual afternoon hour. Penelope looked up in surprise. "Nathan." "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong." He sat across from her, hat in hand, looking oddly uncertain. "I just wanted to stop in while I was in town for supplies, to see how you were doing." "I am well. How is married life?" "Good, really good." "Sarah loves the cabin, and she has already started planning a garden for summer." His face softened when he spoke about his wife, and Penelope tried not to wince. "I am glad for you." They sat in awkward silence, something that had never happened before during all their previous conversations. Penelope shuffled papers unnecessarily. Nathan rotated his hat in his hands. "Things feel different," Nathan said finally. "They are different. You are married now." "Does that mean we cannot still be friends?" Penelope looked at him directly. "I think it means the nature of our friendship must change. You have a wife who should be your primary companion and confidant. Spending afternoons talking with another woman is not appropriate anymore. Sarah knows I value your friendship. She is not concerned about propriety." "Perhaps she should be, or perhaps I should be for her sake and mine." Penelope kept her voice gentle but firm. "Nathan, I am grateful for your friendship, but you have a marriage to build and a ranch to run. I have work to do. It is better if we let the past remain in the past." Something that looked like hurt crossed his face. "You are ending our friendship." "I am recognizing that the circumstances which created it have changed." Nathan stood slowly. "If that is what you want." It was not what she wanted at all. but what she wanted was impossible and inappropriate, so she nodded. He left without another word, and Penelope returned to work, telling herself she had done the right thing even though it felt like she had cut out something essential. She did not see Nathan again for 6 weeks. The spring mining season picked up dramatically, and Penelope was busier than she had been since arriving in Virginia City. She wrote letters from dawn until well past dark, her hand cramping constantly, her inkwell requiring frequent refills. The money was good, finally building a small cushion of savings. Margaret talked about Penelope maybe renting a small house instead of living above the saloon, having her own space. But financial security did not ease the loneliness that had settled over Penelope like a shroud. She had become accustomed to Nathan's visits, to having someone she could talk with about more than the weather and mining yields. His absence was a constant ache. In late May, Sarah appeared at Penelope's table during an afternoon lull. She was alone, which was unusual for married women in mining towns. "Miss Kendrick, may I speak with you?" Sarah asked politely. "Of course. Please sit." Penelope set aside her pen, confused and slightly apprehensive. Sarah arranged herself in the chair across the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple calico dress and a bonnet that shaded her face, practical ranch wife clothing. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but direct. "I wanted to thank you again for all you did to help Nathan and me find each other. You already thanked me at the wedding. I know. But I have been thinking about it more, about how much effort you put into writing those letters, how you helped Nathan express feelings he could not put into words himself. It was a great kindness. It was my job. It was more than that." Sarah tilted her head slightly. "Nathan speaks about you often, about the conversations you had, the books you discussed, the friendship you developed. He misses that, I think." Penelope's chest tightened. "Nathan has you now. He does not need my friendship. I think he needs both. A husband and wife should be partners, but that does not mean either of us should have no other friendships." Sarah paused. "He told me you ended your friendship because you thought it was inappropriate now that he is married. I thought it was best. Best for whom?" Sarah's blue eyes were surprisingly sharp. "Nathan values you greatly, Miss Kendrick, and from what I can see, you valued him too. Why throw that away because of what other people might think? Because every time I see him, I remember that he will never be mine," Penelope thought. "Because watching him be happy with you is like pressing on a bruise that never heals." Aloud, she said, "I did not want to intrude on your marriage. You would not be intruding. I am not so insecure that I fear my husband having a female friend." Sarah leaned forward. "Nathan is planning to come to town next week for supplies. Perhaps you could spare some time to talk with him. He misses your perspective on things." It was a generous offer from a generous woman. Penelope should accept it gracefully, should resurrect the friendship with Nathan for his sake even if it hurt her, but she could not quite force the words out. "I will think about it," she said finally. Sarah nodded and stood. "That is all I ask. Thank you for your time, Miss Kendrick." After she left, Penelope sat at her empty table and tried to untangle her feelings. Sarah had given her permission to remain friends with Nathan, had essentially encouraged it. Any other woman in Penelope's position would be grateful for that kindness, but Penelope was not grateful. She was frustrated and sad and tired of pretending her heart did not crack a little more each time she thought about Nathan building a life with someone else. Margaret appeared at her elbow. That was the cowboy's wife. Yes. What did she want? "To give me permission to be friends with her husband. And will you?" "I do not know if I can." Margaret pulled out the chair Sarah had vacated and sat heavily. "I am going to tell you something you probably do not want to hear. You are young and educated and capable. You could build a good life here in Virginia City, or anywhere really. But you will not do that while you are pining for a man you cannot have. You need to either find a way to truly be just his friend, or you need to let him go completely and move on with your life. I am trying to move on. No, you are trying to tread water while convincing yourself you are swimming. There is a difference. Margaret stood. I am not telling you what to choose, but choose something, child. Anything is better than this half-existence. Nathan came to town the following week, just as Sarah had predicted. Penelope saw him through the saloon window, driving a wagon loaded with empty supply crates. He parked near the mercantile and jumped down from the seat with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his body. She watched him enter the store and tried to decide what to do. She could go out and speak to him, try to resurrect their friendship as Sarah had suggested. Or she could stay in the saloon and let the moment pass, continue with the clean break she had initiated. Before she could decide, the decision was taken from her. A commotion erupted outside, shouts and the sound of panicked horses. Penelope rushed to the window along with everyone else in the saloon. A freight wagon had lost its brake coming down the steep grade on C Street. The heavily loaded wagon was careening downhill, the teamster desperately trying to control his terrified horses. People scattered from its path, but one did not move fast enough, a child of perhaps 6 who had frozen in fear directly in the wagon's path. Nathan burst from the mercantile, assessed the situation in an instant, and ran directly toward the child. He reached the boy just as the wagon bore down on them, scooped him up, and dove sideways. They rolled clear as the wagon thundered past, so close Penelope could see the wheel rim nearly catch Nathan's boot. The wagon continued downhill until it crashed into a water trough, finally stopping. The teamster managed to control his horses. And in the street, Nathan slowly sat up, still holding the child, checking him over for injuries. Penelope was out of the saloon before she consciously decided to move, running across the muddy street to where Nathan knelt with the boy. A woman, presumably the child's mother, reached them at the same time, sobbing with relief. "He is fine," Nathan told her. "Just scared. No injuries that I can see." The mother swept the child into her arms, thanking Nathan over and over through her tears. Other townspeople gathered, congratulating Nathan on his quick thinking, remarking how he had saved the boy's life. Nathan stood, dusting off his clothes, accepting the praise with embarrassed humility. His eyes met Penelope's across the small crowd, and something passed between them, a wordless communication. As the crowd dispersed, Penelope stayed. Nathan walked toward her, and she could see his hands were shaking slightly, the delayed reaction to danger. "That was incredibly brave," she said. "That was incredibly foolish," he corrected. "I could have been killed, and then Sarah would be a widow after 2 months of marriage. But you were not killed. You saved that child." "Yes." He looked down at his scraped hands. "My instincts have always been faster than my common sense." They stood in the middle of C Street, the normal chaos of a mining town flowing around them. Penelope felt something shift inside her, the emotional dam she had built cracking under its own weight. "I have missed you," she said quietly. Nathan's head came up. "I have missed you too. More than I probably should admit. Sarah came to see me. She said you wanted to maintain our friendship. I do. But I understand why you felt it was inappropriate." He paused. "Can I ask you something honestly, Penelope? Was it just about propriety? Or was there another reason you wanted to end our friendship?" This was her chance to lie, to maintain the fiction that would protect her heart. But looking at Nathan's open, honest face, she found she could not do it. "There was another reason," she admitted, "but it does not change anything. You are married to a wonderful woman who loves you. I will not interfere with that." Understanding dawned in Nathan's gray eyes. "Penelope." Please do not say anything, she interrupted. I do not need pity or guilt or anything else. I just need you to know that stepping back from our friendship was not about you failing in some way. It was about me needing to protect myself. From me, from my own feelings. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and Penelope waited for the awkwardness, the pity, the careful distance that would define all future interactions. Instead, he said, I am sorry. If I had known, maybe I could have done something differently. There was nothing to do differently. You fell in love with Sarah through letters, long before we became friends. My feelings are my responsibility, not yours. Still, I am sorry you were hurt. Penelope managed a small smile. I will survive. I am quite good at surviving things. I know you are. Nathan looked at her with something that might have been regret. For what it is worth, if circumstances had been different. They were not different, and speculation about alternate possibilities only makes things harder. She straightened her shoulders. I should return to work. I am glad you are unhurt, Nathan, and I am glad you and Sarah are happy. I genuinely mean that. She turned to walk away, but Nathan caught her hand gently. Can we still be friends, eventually when it hurts less? I do not want to lose you completely from my life, Penelope. You matter to me. Maybe eventually, she said. But not yet. I need more time. He released her hand and nodded. Then I will give you time. Penelope walked back to the saloon, conscious of his eyes on her back, and tried to feel relief at having finally spoken the truth. Instead, she just felt exhausted. Summer arrived in full force, turning Virginia City into a dust bowl of heat and relentless sun. The mines ran at full capacity, and Penelope's letter-writing business thrived. She worked from early morning until late evening, writing correspondence for miners who could afford to think about distant loved ones now that their wages were coming in regularly. She did not see Nathan, though she heard about him occasionally through the network of gossip that connected everyone in small towns. His ranch was doing well. He and Sarah were expecting a child in the winter. They had bought additional land and were expanding their herd. Each piece of news was like a small stone added to a growing cairn marking the life Nathan was building without her. Penelope tried to be happy for him and mostly succeeded. The pain dulled from sharp to aching, from constant to intermittent. In August, Margaret approached Penelope with an unexpected offer. My cousin in San Francisco runs a printing business, Margaret said. He is looking for someone with excellent penmanship and literacy to help with correspondence and bookkeeping. The pay is better than what you make here, and you would have your own small apartment. I told him about you. Penelope set down her pen. You want me to leave Virginia City? I think you should consider it. You have built a good business here, but you are stagnating, child. You are existing but not living. San Francisco could be a fresh start. Running away, you mean. Moving on, Margaret corrected gently. There is no shame in choosing a different path when the current one is making you miserable. I am not miserable. Margaret just looked at her with those knowing eyes. That night, Penelope lay in her narrow bed and seriously considered the offer. San Francisco would be a fresh start, a chance to build a life separate from memories of Nathan. She could make new friends, perhaps eventually meet someone else, create a future that had nothing to do with Nevada territory or mining towns or cowboys. But leaving also felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that she could not overcome her own foolish heart. And more than that, she had grown to love Virginia City in her own way. This harsh mountain town with its constant wind and impossible location had become home. The miners were her clients and her friends. Margaret was family in all but blood. She did not want to leave. She wanted to find a way to stay and be happy despite the pain. In September, Penelope was writing a letter for a German miner when a familiar voice spoke from behind her. Excuse me, miss. I was hoping you could help me write a letter." She turned to find Nathan standing there, hat in hand, a tentative smile on his face. He looked good, healthy, and tan from outdoor work, though thinner than she remembered. "Nathan, what are you doing here? Trying to hire your services if you will accept me as a client again." Penelope gestured to the empty chair. "Who do you need to write to?" he sat, setting his hat on the table. "I need to write to a friend, someone I have not spoken with in several months. I want to apologize for letting time and distance separate us, and I want to ask if she might be willing to try rebuilding that friendship. Nathan, I told you I needed time. It has been 4 months. I am hoping that is enough time. If it is not, I will wait longer. But I wanted to at least try, Penelope. You matter too much to me to just let you disappear from my life." She should send him away, should protect herself from further pain. But looking at his earnest face, she found she did not want to. She had missed him, missed their conversations and his perspective and the way he made her think about things differently. "I cannot go back to what we had before," she said carefully. "Things have changed. We have both changed. I know. But maybe we can find a new version of friendship, one that works with who we are now. What does Sarah think about this? She encouraged me to come. She misses you too, actually. She was hoping you might come to dinner at the ranch sometime, meet her properly outside of town formalities." Penelope studied him, looking for pity or obligation, but finding only genuine warmth. Maybe she could do this, she thought. Maybe enough time had passed that she could be Nathan's friend without constantly mourning what would never be. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. "Tell me how things have been going." Nathan's face lit up, and he began describing his life over the past months. Penelope listened, asked questions, and felt some of the old ease creep back into their interaction. It was not quite the same as before. There was a carefulness now, a mutual awareness of boundaries. But it was something, a foundation to build on. When he left an hour later, Penelope felt lighter than she had in months. Perhaps this was possible after all. Perhaps she could be Nathan's friend and find her own path forward. The dinner invitation came a week later, delivered by Nathan when he was in town for supplies. Penelope accepted, partly because refusing would be rude and partly because she was genuinely curious to see the ranch Nathan had built. She borrowed Margaret's horse and buggy the following Sunday, following Nathan's carefully written directions up into the mountains north of Virginia City. The ranch was tucked in a high valley, just as Nathan had described in his letters to Sarah all those months ago. Good grass, a clear stream, mountains providing shelter from the worst weather. The cabin was small but well built, with glass windows and a covered porch. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the warm day, suggesting bread or roasting meat. As Penelope pulled up, Sarah emerged from the cabin, wiping her hands on her apron. "Miss Kendrick, I am so glad you came." Sarah's greeting was genuinely warm. "Please come inside. Dinner will be ready shortly." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable, clearly set up by someone who valued function and coziness equally. A table Nathan had built himself dominated the main room, surrounded by chairs with hand-sewn cushions. Shelves lined one wall, holding dishes and supplies. In one corner sat a rocking chair with knitting beside it. Nathan emerged from a back room, smiling when he saw Penelope. "You found us easily enough. Your directions were excellent." They ate dinner together, roasted chicken and vegetables from Sarah's garden, fresh bread that Sarah had clearly baked that morning. The conversation flowed easily, covering ranching, mining news, books that Penelope had been reading. Sarah was intelligent and engaged, asking thoughtful questions and offering her own insights. Watching Nathan and Sarah together, Penelope could see the genuine affection between them. They moved around each other with practiced ease, Sarah passing Nathan things before he asked, Nathan automatically refilling Sarah's water glass. They were building a true partnership, exactly as it should be. It still hurt, but it was a softer hurt now. The sharp edges had worn down with time and acceptance. After dinner, while Nathan was outside tending to the horses, Sarah poured tea for herself and Penelope. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said. "Nathan has been happier this past week, knowing you might be willing to resume your friendship. He has been a good friend to me. I did not want to lose that completely." "May I be honest with you, Miss Kendrick?" Penelope braced herself. "Of course. Nathan told me about your feelings for him. I hope you do not mind that he shared that confidence." Heat rose to Penelope's face. "I see. I wanted you to know that I do not blame you for it," Sarah continued gently. "Nathan is easy to love. He is kind and honest and honorable. I cannot fault you for seeing those qualities." "It does not change anything," Penelope said. "He loves you. He made his choice before he even knew I existed." "I know. But I wanted you to understand that I do not see you as a threat or resent your friendship with my husband. Nathan needs friends beyond just me, and I think you need friends too. Perhaps we could both be your friends if you would allow it." It was such an unexpected kindness that Penelope's eyes stung with tears. "You are very generous, Sarah. I am practical. Nathan is going to be friends with you whether I approve or not, because that is who he is. I would rather embrace that friendship than fight it. And selfishly, I would like to have a friend as well. It gets lonely up here sometimes, with Nathan gone working the cattle. Another woman to talk to would be welcome." Penelope found herself smiling despite the tears threatening to fall. "I would like that. I would like both of those things." When Nathan returned, he found them planning Penelope's next visit, discussing books they both wanted to read. He looked between them with obvious relief and happiness, and Penelope realized this could work. She could be friends with both Nathan and Sarah, could build something new and valuable from the ruins of her one-sided love. It would not be what she had wanted, but it could be good. The autumn passed in a new rhythm. Penelope continued her letter-writing business in Virginia City, building her reputation and her savings. She visited the ranch once a month, sometimes more often when Sarah needed company as her pregnancy advanced. She and Sarah became genuine friends, talking about books and ideas and the challenges of life in Nevada territory. Nathan's friendship remained important but different from before. They were careful with each other, maintaining appropriate boundaries, but they still talked about meaningful things. Penelope taught Nathan to read better, working through increasingly difficult books together during her visits. Sarah would join them sometimes, making it a group effort. Penelope's heart healed slowly, the way broken bones knit back together. She would never love Nathan less, but she learned to love him differently, as a friend rather than as an impossible romantic prospect. It was not what she had wanted, but it was something real and valuable. In December, Sarah went into labor during a snowstorm. Nathan rode through dangerous conditions to fetch the doctor in Virginia City, but the baby came too fast. By the time they returned, Sarah had given birth to a healthy boy with the help of a neighboring rancher's wife. They named him Thomas, after Nathan's father. Penelope visited when the snow cleared, bringing gifts she had sewn during long evenings above the saloon. She held Thomas while Sarah rested, marveling at his tiny perfection. This was Nathan's son, the beginning of his family. The thought still carried a pang, but mostly she felt happiness for her friends. "Would you be his godmother?" Sarah asked unexpectedly. "Officially, I mean. If something happened to us, I would want someone who loves him to help guide him." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Penelope said automatically. "But if it did, would you?" Penelope looked at the baby in her arms, at Sarah's hopeful face, at Nathan standing in the doorway watching them both. This was an honor and a responsibility and a permanent tie to Nathan's family. "Yes," she said, "I would be honored." The years that followed were good ones. Penelope's business continued to thrive, and she eventually moved from the room above the saloon to a small house of her own on the edge of Virginia City. She still wrote letters for minors, but she also began teaching reading and writing classes in the evenings, helping men who wanted to improve their literacy. The ranch prospered. Nathan and Sarah had a second child, a daughter they named Caroline. Penelope visited regularly, watching Thomas and Caroline grow, serving as godmother and friend and aunt in all but blood. She was part of their family in a way she had never expected, woven into their lives through bonds of affection and choice. Men occasionally expressed interest in courting Penelope. She allowed a few to try, going to dances and dinners, but nothing ever developed into real attachment. She told herself she was too particular, too independent, too set in her ways. The truth was that she had loved deeply once, and even though that love had transformed into friendship, it had permanently changed her capacity for romance. She was not unhappy, though. She had work that mattered, friends who valued her, a community that respected her skills. It was a good life, built from survival and determination and eventual acceptance. On a spring morning in 1881, 5 years after she first arrived in Virginia City, Penelope was writing a letter for a newly arrived immigrant when Nathan walked into the saloon. She looked up in surprise. He usually only came to town on specific supply days, and today was not one of them. "Nathan, is everything all right?" "Yes, fine. I just needed to talk to you about something." He sat across from her, turning his hat in his hands with familiar nervousness. "What is it?" "Sarah and I were talking, and we have a proposal for you. The children need better education than we can provide at the ranch. Sarah is good with basic reading and arithmetic, but she wants them to have more. We were hoping you might consider teaching them, maybe coming to the ranch a few days each week. We would pay you, of course, whatever your normal rate is." Penelope considered this. "I have my business here in town." "I know. That is why we thought just a few days each week. You could still maintain your letter writing, but you would also have guaranteed income from teaching, and it would help us tremendously." It was a sensible arrangement that would benefit everyone. More than that, it would give Penelope more time with the children she had come to love as her own niece and nephew. "All right," she said. "When would you want me to start?" "Next week. Sarah is eager to begin as soon as possible." They worked out the details over the next hour, and Penelope felt excited for the first time in months. This was a new challenge, a chance to use her education in a different way. She had never seriously considered teaching before, but the idea appealed to her. Teaching Thomas and Caroline became the highlight of Penelope's week. She rode up to the ranch every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, spending the day working with the children on reading, writing, arithmetic, and eventually history and science as they grew older. They were bright students, curious and engaged, and Penelope discovered she had a natural talent for explaining complex ideas in accessible ways. Sarah often joined the lessons, learning alongside her children. Nathan would sometimes participate too, continuing his own education during midday breaks from ranch work. The 4 of them, occasionally 5 when baby Caroline was old enough, would gather around the kitchen table, books and slates spread before them, learning together. Penelope's other business continued. She still wrote letters for minors and taught evening classes in town. But the ranch teaching became central to her life, giving her a sense of purpose beyond simple survival. More years passed. Virginia City boomed and then began a slow decline as silver yields decreased. Some miners moved on to new strikes in other territories. Penelope's letter-writing business contracted accordingly, but her teaching income remained steady. She took on additional students in town, children of miners and merchants who wanted education for their offspring. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books almost as much as horses. Caroline was bright and bold, asking constant questions about everything. Penelope watched them develop into real people with distinct personalities, and she felt pride in her small role in shaping their minds. Sarah became one of Penelope's closest friends, the sister she had never had. They talked about everything, from serious topics like women's suffrage to silly things like the latest fashions depicted in catalogs from San Francisco. Nathan remained a steady presence, a dear friend whose company Penelope valued without the pain that had once accompanied every interaction. In 1886, a decade after Penelope first arrived in Nevada Territory, she sat on the Ashford Ranch porch watching Thomas and Caroline play in the yard. They were 10 and 8 now, growing fast, their childhood slipping away more quickly than seemed possible. Nathan emerged from the barn and came to sit beside her, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. He passed her one and settled into the other rocking chair with a comfortable sigh. "Sarah says you are thinking about writing a book," he said. "Sarah talks too much. She is excited for you." "What is the book about?" Penelope sipped her lemonade, tart and sweet. "Letters, actually. All the things I learned from writing correspondence for miners over the years. The common themes in what people want to say to loved ones, the universal nature of longing and hope and love despite vast differences in circumstance." "That sounds profound. You should definitely write it, maybe, if I can find the time between teaching and my other work." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children chase each other around the yard. Sarah appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron, smiling at the domestic scene. "Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes, she announced. "Penelope, are you staying? If the invitation is open." "The invitation is always open. You know that." After Sarah returned inside, Nathan turned to Penelope. "Can I tell you something I have never quite figured out how to say?" "Of course." "That first day when I came to you needing help writing to Sarah, I thought I was just hiring a service. I did not know I was meeting someone who would become one of the most important people in my life. You have been such a gift to me and to my family, Penelope. I do not say that often enough." Penelope's throat tightened with emotion. "You have been a gift to me too. All of you have. You gave me a family when I thought I would be alone forever. You will never be alone. You are stuck with us Ashfords now, for better or worse." She laughed, blinking back tears. "I can think of worse fates." That evening, riding back to Virginia City under a sky full of stars, Penelope reflected on the strange path her life had taken. She had come west desperate and grieving, with no prospects and no plan beyond survival. She had fallen in love with a man she could not have, and had her heart broken in the quietest, most profound way. But from that heartbreak, she had built something better than what she had originally wanted. She had friends who were family, work that mattered, children to teach and love. She had a life rich with meaning and connection, even if it looked nothing like what she had imagined. The pain of loving Nathan had transformed into something sustainable and good. He would always be important to her, but no longer in a way that hurt. She had made peace with the path not taken, and had found satisfaction in the path she walked instead. More years unfolded, each bringing changes and challenges. Virginia City continued its slow decline, but enough miners remained to keep Penelope's business viable. Her teaching reputation grew, and families across the region sought her services. She eventually hired 2 assistants to help with the increased demand, young women she trained in her methods. Thomas announced at 16 that he wanted to become a lawyer, an ambition that both thrilled and terrified his parents given the education required. Penelope worked with him relentlessly, preparing him for the entrance examinations to a law program in San Francisco. When he was accepted at 18, the whole family celebrated, even as they mourned the upcoming separation. Caroline declared she wanted to be a teacher like Penelope, which made Penelope's heart swell with pride. She began training Caroline in educational methods, passing on everything she had learned over the years. In 1891, 15 years after Penelope first arrived in Nevada territory, Sarah fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Despite the doctor's best efforts, she died within a week, leaving Nathan devastated and the children motherless. Penelope moved to the ranch temporarily to help Nathan manage the household and care for the children through their grief. She cooked and cleaned and held crying children and sat with Nathan during the long nights when his sorrow made sleep impossible. "I do not know how to do this without her," Nathan said one night, his face gray with exhaustion and grief. "She was my partner in everything." "You do it one day at a time," Penelope replied, the same advice she had once given herself after her own losses. "You get up every morning because the children need you. You put one foot in front of the other. Eventually, the steps get easier. Does the pain ease? It changes. It becomes something you carry rather than something that crushes you." She stayed at the ranch for 3 months, until Nathan seemed steady enough to manage on his own. Thomas came home from San Francisco to help, taking a semester away from his studies. Caroline, now 13, tried to fill her mother's role with heartbreaking determination. When Penelope finally returned to town, her house felt strange and empty. She had grown accustomed to the ranch's rhythms, to the children's constant presence, to eating meals with family rather than alone. Margaret noticed the change immediately. "You should just marry him," Margaret said bluntly one afternoon. Penelope looked up from the letter she was writing. "Marry who?" "The cowboy, Nathan. His wife has been gone 6 months. A year from now, when the mourning period is complete, you should marry him. He was devoted to Sarah. He is not going to want to remarry. He is going to need a partner to help run that ranch and raise those children. You already love the children, you understand the work, and you two have been friends for 15 years. It makes perfect sense. It makes calculated sense. But marriage should be about love, not convenience." Margaret gave her a knowing look. "And you still love him, even after all this time?" Penelope set down her pen. "Yes, I never stopped loving him. I just learned to love him as a friend rather than as a potential partner. Marrying him now, after Sarah's death, would feel like I was taking advantage of his grief and vulnerability. Or it could feel like 2 people who care about each other building something new from shared loss and affection. But I suppose that is for you and him to figure out, not me." Penelope thought about that conversation often over the following months. She had made peace with being Nathan's friend, had convinced herself that was enough. But Sarah's death had shifted everything, opening possibilities that Penelope had closed off years ago. She did not act on those possibilities, though. Nathan was grieving, and the children were grieving, and Penelope would not insert her own desires into their pain. She continued helping at the ranch, teaching the children, supporting Nathan through his adjustment to widowhood. She said nothing about her feelings, the same feelings that had never truly gone away despite years of careful management. A year after Sarah's death, Nathan came to Virginia City specifically to see Penelope. She was teaching an evening class when he arrived, and he waited patiently until her students left before approaching. "Can we talk?" he asked. They walked to Penelope's small house, where she made coffee, and they sat in her tiny parlor. Nathan held his cup without drinking, gathering his thoughts. "The ranch is doing well," he said finally. "Thomas will graduate next year and plans to open a law practice in Carson City. Caroline has decided she wants to attend a teaching college in Sacramento. They are both ready to start their own lives. You raised good children. Sarah would be proud." "We raised them together, you and Sarah and I. They are as much your accomplishment as ours." He set down his cup. "Penelope, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to answer honestly. All right? You still have feelings for me. Romantic feelings, I mean, not just friendship." Her heart began to pound. "Why are you asking?" "Because if you do, I would like to court you, properly, openly, with the intention of eventual marriage if we suit each other." Penelope stared at him. "Nathan, you loved Sarah. You grieved so deeply when she died." "I did love her and I did grieve her. I will always love her memory. But Sarah has been gone a year and I am tired of being alone." He leaned forward. "You have been part of my life for 15 years, Penelope. You know me better than anyone. You helped me raise my children. You have been my friend through every important moment since I arrived in Nevada territory. Over this past year, I realized that what I feel for you has become more than friendship. I love you. I think I have loved you for a long time without recognizing it. You never said anything. I was married. It would have been inappropriate and cruel to say anything." He met her eyes directly. "But I am not married anymore, and I do not want to spend whatever years I have left pretending I do not have feelings for you." Penelope's mind was racing. "I do not want to be a replacement for Sarah." "You could never be a replacement. You are yourself, unique and irreplaceable. If we did this, we would be building something new, not trying to recreate what I had before." He paused. "You did not answer my question. Do you still have feelings for me?" She could deny it, protect herself one final time. But she was tired of protection, tired of managing her heart, tired of being sensible and cautious. "Yes," she said. "I never stopped having feelings for you. I just learned to suppress them." Nathan's face broke into a smile. "Then can I court you? Can we see if we could build something together? Are you certain this is what you want? Not just comfort or convenience, I am certain. I have had a year to think about this, to examine my feelings. I want to share my life with you, Penelope. I want to grow old with you. I want you to officially be part of my family instead of just unofficially. If you will have me." She thought about everything she had built since arriving in Nevada territory. Her business, her teaching, her independence. Marrying Nathan would change all of that. But it would also give her what she had wanted for so long, a life shared with someone she loved deeply. "Yes," she said, "you can court me." The courtship was sweet and surprisingly romantic for two people who had known each other for 15 years. Nathan brought her flowers and took her to dinners. They went on long rides into the mountains, talking about their hopes and plans. They were careful to maintain propriety, conscious of appearances in a town that loved gossip. Thomas and Caroline were delighted when they learned about the courtship. Caroline hugged Penelope and declared she had always hoped this would happen. Thomas gave his approval with adult seriousness that made Penelope want to laugh and cry simultaneously. 6 months after the courtship began, Nathan proposed formally. They were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. He turned to her and took her hand. "Marry me, Penelope. Not because it is practical or convenient, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Make this ranch your home. Make me your husband, please." "Yes," she said, the easiest answer she had ever given. They married in the same church where Nathan had married Sarah 15 years earlier. The guest list was different, reflecting all the years and changes that had occurred. Margaret was there, older but still sharp-eyed and knowing. Minor's Penelope had written letters for came to see her wed. Ranch families who had become friends over the years filled the pews. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, with wildflowers in her hair. Nathan wore a new suit and looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Thomas gave her away, walking her down the aisle with pride. Caroline stood as her bridesmaid. When the minister asked if she would take Nathan as her husband, Penelope said yes with her whole heart. And when Nathan kissed her, finally, after 15 years of careful distance and suppressed feelings, it felt like coming home. The reception was held at the ranch, a celebration that lasted well into the evening. People danced and ate and toasted the couple's happiness. Penelope stood with Nathan's arm around her waist and felt complete in a way she had forgotten was possible. That night, in the cabin that was now her home, Nathan held her close and whispered, "I know this is not the life you originally imagined when you came west. But I am grateful every day that you ended up here." "I am grateful too," Penelope replied. "Every difficult moment led me to this. I would not change any of it. The years that followed were deeply happy." Penelope continued her teaching, now working from the ranch and bringing students there for lessons. She finally wrote her book about letters and longing, dedicating it to all the people who trust strangers with their hearts. It was published by a small press in San Francisco and sold modestly but steadily, finding an audience among people who understood the power of written connection. Thomas established his law practice and eventually married a woman from Carson City. They gave Nathan and Penelope 3 grandchildren who visited the ranch every summer. Caroline graduated from teaching college and opened her own school for young women in Sacramento, becoming a respected educator in her own right. Nathan and Penelope ran the ranch together, true partners in every sense. They expanded the operation, hired hands to help with the work, and built a comfortable life from mutual effort and affection. They traveled occasionally, visiting San Francisco and Denver, seeing more of the world than either had expected. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Penelope sat on the porch watching Nathan work with a new horse in the corral. He moved with the same confidence and capability he had always possessed, though his hair was graying now and lines marked his face. He caught her watching and smiled, that transformative smile that had once made her heart ache. She smiled back, no ache now, just warmth and contentment and deep abiding love. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan called. "About letters," she called back. "About how a man who could not write came to me for help 15 years ago and how that simple request changed everything." Nathan walked toward the porch, removing his gloves. "Best decision I ever made, asking you to write my love letters, even though they were to someone else, especially because they were to someone else. If I had met you first, if you had been the one I was writing to, we might never have had all these years of friendship first. We needed that time to become who we needed to be for each other." He climbed the porch steps and pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly despite being sweaty from work. Penelope laughed and kissed him back, tasting salt and sunshine and home. "I love you," Nathan said against her hair. "I love you too. I always have." They stood together on the porch, looking out over the land they had built their life on, and Penelope thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. She had come west running from grief and desperation. She had fallen in love with the wrong man at the wrong time. She had survived heartbreak and learned to transform it into friendship, and eventually, impossibly, she had gotten everything she wanted, just not in the way or timing she had expected. The sun set over the mountains, painting everything gold. Inside the ranch house, dinner was waiting. Grandchildren's drawings decorated the walls. Books lined the shelves, including the one Penelope had written. Evidence of a life well lived, of love earned and friendship treasured. Nathan took her hand and led her inside, to the table where they would eat together, to the bedroom where they would sleep in each other's arms, to the future they would continue building side by side. Penelope had transcribed letters for illiterate minors, and a cowboy had asked her to write only his love letters. From that simple transaction, she had found family and purpose, and eventually, after years of patience and heartbreak and transformation, she had found lasting love. It was a better ending than any story she could have written, and it was entirely, beautifully real.